The Price of Betrayal, a tragic tale of greed and regret. In a grand mansion surrounded by tall trees and golden fences lived a majestic golden retriever, Bruno, and his little son, Coco. This house was their paradise. They had soft cushions to sleep on, fresh meat to eat, and a garden big enough to run freely. Madame Eleanor, their owner, loved them dearly. But as time passed, Bruno noticed something. Coco was the real favorite. Whenever guests arrived, they picked up Coco, cuddled him, and laughed at his adorable antics. Bruno, he was just the father. Even when he walked into the room, no one paid attention to him. He still had a comfortable life, but something inside him was changing. I deserve more than this, he often thought. He started observing the family closely. Whenever Eleanor petted Coco, her eyes sparkled with love. But when she looked at Bruno, it was different. Like he was just there, just a pet, nothing special. That's when greed took root in his heart. I need a better home, a place where I am the favorite, a place where Coco and I are not just pets, but treasures. One day, Bruno overheard the servants talking about a billionaire named Mr. Vincent. He was obsessed with rare breeds and had a house 10 times bigger than Eleanor's. He pampered his dogs like royalty. Bruno's heart raced with desire. If I can reach that place, Coco and I will have the best life imaginable. But how could he leave? That night, as the house fell silent, Bruno made his move. He sneaked into Eleanor's bedroom and took her diamond-studded watch. With careful steps, he carried it outside and buried it near the garden's fence. The next morning, chaos erupted. Eleanor searched for her watch, growing anxious. The servants were accused and tension filled the air. Then, one of them suggested, Maybe Bruno took it? Eleanor hesitated. No, Bruno would never... But doubt had entered her mind. That evening, she called Bruno over. Bruno, did you do something wrong? Bruno stood still. He didn't deny it. Instead, he made his final move. He growled. A deep, threatening growl that he had never used before. Eleanor gasped. Her heart ached, but fear crept in. He's not the same anymore. That night, as everyone slept, Bruno ran away. But he wasn't alone. As soon as Bruno crossed the gates, he heard tiny footsteps behind him. Coco was following him. Dad, wait for me! Bruno stopped in shock. Coco, no, you weren't supposed to come. But before he could react, headlights flooded the road. A speeding car rushed towards Coco. Bruno lunged forward, pushing Coco aside. And the world turned black. Bruno woke up on the cold ground. His body ached, his head throbbed, but none of it mattered. Because Coco was gone, Bruno searched desperately. He barked, ran through the streets, sniffed every corner, but his son had disappeared. He had lost Coco. The luxury he dreamed of? It didn't exist anymore. Bruno was now just a stray. He roamed the streets begging for food, chased away by cruel shopkeepers. The nights were cold and empty. He had once slept on velvet cushions. Now he shivered on wet pavement. But Coco? His suffering was far worse. Miles away, Coco was trapped in a metal cage. He had been captured by animal traffickers. The dark room smelled of blood and fear. Other caged animals whimpered and cried. Coco's tiny body shook. He didn't know where he was. All he knew was his father wasn't coming. Days turned into weeks. Bruno was no longer recognizable. His golden fur had turned to dust. His ribs poked through his skin. His once bright eyes had lost their shine. One day he wandered near a butcher's shop. His stomach ached with hunger. But the butcher saw him and kicked him hard. Bruno yelped, falling onto the wet ground. People walked by, uncaring. That night, as rain poured, Bruno lay under an old cart, whispering to himself. I had everything. I had a home. I had Coco. I had love. And I threw it all away. Meanwhile, Coco's nightmare was reaching its end. The traffickers had made their decision. Coco would be killed. His soft, golden fur was too valuable. As they dragged him out of the cage, Coco's tiny paws struggled. His eyes were wide with fear, but he didn't fight. Because deep down, he was still waiting. Dad, we'll come. Bruno, miles away, lifted his weak head, looking at the dark sky. He felt something, a sharp, unbearable pain in his heart. And at that moment, 2 painful cries echoed in different places. And then, silence. Bruno's head fell to the ground. Coco's body went still. Both father and son were gone, and no one in the world even knew. Coco's fur was sold in a market. Bruno's body rotted on the streets. No one came looking for them. Eleanor's mansion remained beautiful, but the love they once had disappeared forever. Time moved on, and just like that, they were forgotten. This story teaches us that greed blinds us from what truly matters. Bruno thought he deserved more, but in chasing a dream, he lost everything. And in the end, time erased him like he never existed.